Hi and welcome. Today, in today's video, today's presentation, we are going to be talking about FAPE. It's also kind of like the background question to the question that I get all the time from parents, which is, what can I ask for on my IEP? So let's get into it. I'm Lisa Lightner. That is me and my son, Kevin. We do reside near Philadelphia. My two websites that you definitely want to check out, adayinourshoes.org is where I have all of my training options and products. Adayinourshoes.com is my website, which is filled with over 700 different articles. I have IEP goal lists, all kinds of goal ideas for your IEP, letter templates for parents, just a ton of things. If you are struggling with your IEP, I've answered, like I said, almost 700 questions about IEPs, and I answer them on my website. So you definitely want to check it out. But today we're talking about FAPE. And what is it? It's a word or a term or an acronym that you are going to hear a lot if your child does have an IEP. FAPE really is the cornerstone of special education. FAPE, like I said, is an acronym, and it stands for Free and Appropriate Education. That term came from a Supreme Court ruling. Now it's been several decades since that ruling came out, but the Supreme Court ruling basically said that disabled children are entitled to a free and appropriate education. So for as much as I love talking about IEPs, it's a really flawed system. So, and what I don't like about it, and I understand the purpose behind it, but I do not like these vague words that schools are held to as far as standards. And one of those words is appropriate. Another one is meaningful. And the reason that I don't like them is because when you talk about free, like we know what free is, right? Like free is free, just like the commercial, free. Free means at no cost to parents for your education. The next piece is appropriate. And what is appropriate? Because that is not black and white. And that is, in my experience, that is the main thing that parents and schools fight about forever. And that is what a parent thinks is appropriate for their child and what a school thinks is appropriate for the child are sometimes not the same thing. And that is where IEP disputes begin. And it's unfortunate. Now, I get it because the US government or the Supreme Court, they can't come out with this like giant checklist or this giant manual or menu, right? Like a lot of parents expect that there's like going to be this a la carte menu of supports and services to choose from for your child. And IDEA does not do that, nor do state regs. The reason being because you're always going to have some kids for whom none of that is appropriate. And there's going to be like this other thing that for them would be appropriate. And then they'd be excluded because it wasn't listed in IDEA. The main principle of IDEA, in addition to free and appropriate, is the whole I in IDEA and I in IEP, which is individual. So the education that your child receives should be free. It should be appropriate to them based on their individual needs. But again, what a parent thinks that is and what the school thinks that is not always the same thing. So that's just it. So parents go, so what does that mean? What does FAPE mean? And what can I ask for? Well, so here's the thing about FAPE, and that is, and about IEPs in general. IDEA goes on about how parents need to be included. And they talk about inviting parents to meetings and all this other stuff. And there's been a lot of case law about parent participation in the process, which is another one of the main principles, that the parent is a participant. But so it's written in there that, parents are mandated IEP team members. That means the school has to include and has to make an effort to include the parent in this IEP development. Now, most parents want to be involved. Some do not. And yes, some ignore meeting invitations and things like that. But the school has to make a concerted effort to include you and include you as part of this IEP development process, right? For your child to get FAPE, the parent needs to be involved. But the problem with that is, even though in theory parents are equal IEP team members, mandated IEP team members, they must be included in the process. At the end of it all, at the end of evaluations and IEP team meetings and all that other stuff, the school really gets the upper hand because they are still going to come to you with their final offer of FAPE, right? And if it doesn't agree with you, or if you don't agree with what that final offer of FAPE is, you don't think it's appropriate, you don't think it's individualized, whatever the case may be, it's on you then to use your procedural safeguards, which we're going to get into in a minute. So all that to say, like, you can ask for anything. It doesn't mean that they have to entertain or they do actually have to entertain. They have to consider all of your requests in writing, your written requests. And that's a whole thing about, and I have it on my training course if you want to look into it. I spend several modules just explaining how to develop a solid parent concerns letter and pair it with a PWN, which is another official document in the IEP process. So what you can ask for is, yes, you can ask for anything. What increases your chances of getting it and what moves an IEP team to yes is, do you have the data and documentation to support that is what your child needs? You have to have the data and documentation to prove that is appropriate. The canned generic example I always give is a social skills class, right? Some schools, they have the OT or the speech therapist or someone provide social skills training for kids, right? A mom sees her child, they see and witness and observe their child struggling with social skills, so they want them to get this social skills training. So they ask for it, right? They know this class exists. They know that this intervention exists at the school and they want their kid in it. So they ask for it. If it is not documented earlier in the IEP that social skills is an area of need for your child, you're not going to get that service. Okay. So again, you can ask for anything, but you need to make sure that you have the data and documentation to support that need and that support or intervention, whatever it is that you're asking for. If you take my training, I spend a lot of time explaining this, and I make it harder for IEP teams to say no. And by helping you identify and define your child's needs and get them documented, right? Because that's what it's all about. It's about not only getting what is appropriate for your child, but what is individualized to them. Why do they need this? Whatever it is that you're asking for. Why is whatever it is that you're asking for, why is that FAPE for your child? For some parents, it might be shortened school days, shortened school weeks. We had a lot of parents asking for home instruction, like when we had the pandemic and all that, that was chaos. But there were a lot of very individualized needs, particularly with our medically complex and medically fragile kids, that those parents had to demonstrate and redefine what FAPE looked like for their kids, given that they have these complex medical needs and there's a pandemic going on, right? You have to get that stuff kind of documented. You can't just say, hey, I need for my kid to get home instruction until the pandemic passes, or whatever the case may be. It has to be appropriate. It has to be individualized. You also should read, and I know it's boring reading, to read your procedural safeguards, which is what the parental rights, parents say to me all the time, what are my parental rights? And so I know I have rights in this process. What are they? That tells me that you have not read the procedural safeguards that you've been handed. Admittedly, it's a very boring book. It's, depending on where you live, it's anywhere from 40 to, I think, 60 pages or so of teeny tiny font, no pictures, not interesting reading. It's a lot of legal language, but you have to work your way through them periodically to know your rights, so that if you believe that the school has come to you with an offer that is not FAPE for your child, you need to know what to do next. And I can tell you, if a school team senses that you do not know your rights and that you're not reading them, you will be taken advantage of. And it's not necessarily done with malice. It's, we don't have these nefarious mustache twisting school staff, but if they know that you're not kind of engaged with your rights and paying attention, they'll just kind of gloss over some things and things will happen. And then you're going to wake up in 3 to 5 years and go, wait a minute, what just happened? Why isn't my child making any progress? Why is he going to high school and he's only reading at a 3rd grade level, right? You have to stay engaged and know your parental rights, read those procedural safeguards. To get FAPE, to get that free and appropriate education, to get a solid offer of FAPE and what is appropriate for your child and meet your child's needs, the IEP process has become very litigious and data-driven. There are complaint procedures if parents disagree with the offer of FAPE, and they are legal proceedings. They are legal hearings. Your school district will have attorneys present. So again, you want to read up on your parental rights and know what you're getting into and know what your options are. Again, if you are presented with the school's final offer of FAPE and you don't agree with it, what are your options? What are your next steps? What can you do? I have a ton of information on that, on all of that on my website, adayinourshoes.com. I have things about my child's not making progress, or I don't agree with my team on goals, or, goals disappeared from the IEP and all kinds of stuff, right? So for more information, visit my site, adayinourshoes.com. If you go to forums.adayinourshoes.com, those are online chat forums. Every question is answered by a professional advocate. So definitely tune in there with your IEP or 504 plan questions if you have them. Please follow me on Facebook. There's my Facebook page. And you can go to adayinourshoes.org to see the IEP toolkit, all of my online training, and anything else that you might need. Oh, the podcast. The podcast is on there as well. So enjoy the rest of your day. And I hope that this has helped explain to you what FAPE is.